Welcome back, everyone, to the series Aramaic in the New Testament. This is part 7, where we'll be looking at the term Rabbouni as it's used in John 20, verse 16. So, John 20:11 through 16 reads, "But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, 'Woman, why are you weeping?' She said to them, 'Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him.' Saying this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, 'Woman, why are you weeping? Whom do you seek?' Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away.' Jesus said to her, 'Mary.' She turned and said to him in Hebrew, 'Rabbouni,' which means teacher. So let's go ahead and look at this word Rabbouni. You'll notice it looks a lot like rabbi, the way we say rabbi in English. I'll say Rabbi. Rabbi is the more common Syriac way of doing it, or Aramaic way of saying it. And of course, it's also used by the Jewish community to refer to their teachers. You'll either see it as Rav or Rabbi, and it means my great one, effectively, my great one. Now, my great one, because Rabbo means to be large or big, to be much. Now, this sense of being great is an honorific, and it's used for teachers. And this isn't something that's just a part of the Jewish community. The Christian community uses it too. Christians of the East Syrian tradition, or Assyrian Christians, usually from the East tradition, will refer to, well, they'll refer to priests as Rabbi Kasha. Kasha just means it's a short for kashisha, meaning elder, and that's elder in the sense of a priest. So they'll call a priest Rabbi Kasha, Rabbi teacher, or I'm sorry, teacher priest, if you will. And they'll also refer to other teachers who aren't necessarily priests by that title. And that can be like a school teacher, it could be a theological teacher, or someone in the community who has a teaching role. We'll say Rabbi. And I use this for my own Surith Assyrian teacher. I call him Rabbi Atur. And he was not a priest. Well, he's still not a priest, but he holds that title in the community because he's a teacher. And so it means my teacher. Well, similarly, Rabbouni does too. And you'll notice in the New Testament, Christ is called Rabbi in numerous places. And I have a list here if you ever want to verify. Some English translations will use Rabbi or rabbi. Others will just translate it as master, which is another way, I guess, of thinking of a teacher, or a great one, right? A great one like a master. Typically in the book of John, since John introduces a translation in the Greek after the first incidents of Rabbi in John 1:38, it says, which means teacher. So the rest of the book of John, you might see the translation reading rabbi or rabbi instead of just master. It really depends on the English translation that you get. But when we get to John 20:16, we see this other word, Rabbouni. Now, this is a really cool word. It's a diminutive. What's a diminutive? A diminutive is a word that refers to a small thing. It's like the ito ending in Spanish, or the ino ending in Italian. It could be an et ending in English or French. It's a way of speaking about something in a gentle way that, yes, it is small, but it's not about the size so much as it is the relationship. And usually it's an affectionate relationship. It's a caring relationship. Often family members or people who are close will use this ending. And so in Aramaic, for example, we have different words for the word brother. We'll say aho. Aho means brother, but ahuno means brother with the diminutive ending. So you'll often hear Syriac speakers say, "Hey, Aherno," or "Hey, Chona," and that's referring to someone, as a brother, but maybe more familiar, maybe more dear to the person, call it more intimate in that sense. It's basically a way of familiarizing the term and making it more, call it emotionally meaningful. So what's cool about when Mary Magdalene sees Jesus in John 20 is she doesn't just call him Rabbi, she calls him Rabbouni. Like it's a surprise, and it's like, it's you, and I think the next time you read it, it's not just my teacher or my master or whatever the following English translation provides, but it's something of closeness, of affection, you could say, and care. And that might be lost a little bit in the translation. I mean, she could have just said Rabbi, and that would have sufficed for how much we've seen it throughout scripture. Instead, she says Rabbouni. What's interesting more is that in Aramaic, in the Syriac New Testament translations, and I'm including the Pshito on top and the palimpsest from Sinai below, just to look and see the word used. It's actually not Rabbouni, it's Rabbouli, and this has a little different meaning. We'll just go ahead and read this here since I've made a habit of it in these videos. O marlo yesh'u Maryam wetfanyath wa omrole evroith Rabbouli v'methemar malfono. And that basically means Jesus said to her, Maryam, and she turned and said to him in Hebrew, Rabbouli, that is to say, teacher. So an interesting thing about the Pshito above is it's actually, it looks like it's a Aramaic translation of the Greek. It's including that definition of a word, which, is interesting here. Maybe we can read the other verse just and compare the two. Hoiden omarlo yesh'u Maryam westaqalte wa'anyath womrole Rabbouli. So in the second verse, there's no translation of what Rabbouli means. It's just said, right? The one above, there is a translation, and it translates Rabbouli as malfono. That's interesting in a way. I wonder how and why the Syriac translation came to be. Rabbouli means something like, the chief shepherd, right? And so it's a leadership position. Does it necessarily mean malfono? Malfono means teacher, and that's a word for teacher. Rabbi means my great one, and it's a word used for teachers out of respect. But malfono is from the root yelaf, which means to teach or even learn, depending on the stem that you use it in. And so the second term, malfono, you can see is the last word in the top on the left. That means teacher. But Rabbouli is sort of a chief shepherd or a large one. Is that the case? A frequent shift that happens in languages, not just Semitic, although there's plenty of instances of this across different Semitic languages. And it's a liquid shift where letters like N and L, these sounds, they end up changing between different languages. I just picked the word between, Baal and Bain. They both mean between, but one uses an L, the other uses an N, or one uses a Lamet, the other uses a Nun to use their letters in Aramaic or Hebrew for that matter. So that could be the source of the Rabbouni versus Rabbouli. Here I'm taking a definition of Rabbula from Barbahul's dictionary, where he's calling it the chief of the shepherds, and also a name that belongs to the bishop of Edessa, of the city of Edessa. That's Rabbula of Edessa. In fact, some of the images you may see me use from time to time are from the Rabbula Gospel, so-called, this different illuminated manuscript in Aramaic and Syriac. So is it the same word, just articulated differently based on an accent shift? That could be one possibility. Could be an intentional difference between the words. I don't necessarily have a good answer for that. I like the diminutive use of the term by Mary Magdalene. I think it's, it really represents her shock and surprise. And all of a sudden, here he is. And you could tell there's a happiness in her words, where she's using very familiar language instead of formal language. And I think that that holds well. The other term, you see in Syriac literature, I mean, it's in the big names, Ephraim, Jacob of Sarug, Philoxenus of Mabug, Ishudad of Merv. They all use Rabbouli in some capacity or another because it's a word in Syriac. And so I wonder if we just have a difference of text transmission, or maybe, they basically meant the same thing and the accent in one place preferred the articulation of Rabbouli instead of Rabbouni. I don't quite have an answer, but there's a number of possibilities. That's all I have for Rabbi and Rabbouni. If you like this video, go ahead and continue to like, share, subscribe, and please comment below. I appreciate all your comments and the personal emails that I get from you. If any of these have been a benefit, definitely go ahead and share them with either your friends or your church community, and we can keep Aramaic fresh in the mind of all readers of the New Testament. It's definitely the most underrated language of the Christian tradition. So thanks again. Fushun Bashlomo, Fushun Bashlama. Remain in peace.